Well, hello. It's been a while. Before I start this video, I have to tell you, you might hear some crunching in the background, and that's because I just got home from working 12 hours. And my girls are hungry, aren't you? This is Penny. Yes, I missed you too. Missed you too. And her sister's the one doing the crunching right now, but you might be hearing some crunching in stereo. So I'm about to put Penny girl down. There you go, girl. So you might just have to bear with the crunching because my girls have been waiting for this all day. So taking a break from politics for a while. Some of my previous videos, I was really concentrated on a local political race here, and I just don't want that to consume most of my time. Goals were set and goals were achieved, and I feel like that was enough. What I'd like to do, boy, they are really crunching, aren't they? I'd like to tell you some more stories about my life, if that's okay. I have been listening to a podcast called the Lawless Files, and it's produced and hosted by former Southeast Missourian reporter and later editor Bob Miller. And it's an investigation into the murder of a young lady named Michelle Lawless that occurred in 1992. And you may or may not have heard of this, but essentially they convicted the wrong man for the murder. He was totally set up. He was not even in the state when the murder happened, and he spent 16 years in prison for a murder he did not commit. And Bob has done a really good job not only talking about the wrongful conviction and later exoneration of Joshua Keyser, but he's also been delving into who the possible perpetrator of this murder was. It's been very interesting to listen to. And I kind of had a history with Bob, 17 years ago now, actually. But we'll get into that in a minute. Bob has detailed a lot of the corruption that happened in Scott County, Missouri, where the murder took place. And he's not only delved into possible suspects who committed the murder, he's done a good job detailing the environment of the time of which the murder happened. There was a lot of corruption, from elected officials, from the sheriff at the time. And I was really surprised when I was listening to episode 12, part 1 of this podcast series. And I'll tell you why. I grew up in a little bitty place called Payton, Missouri, in Stoddard County. And 1 mile away was the Scott County line. And in the early to mid 80s, I was probably in middle school, maybe junior high at the time this happened. There was an airport in Payton. Payton at the time probably had 50 people, maybe. A railroad ran through the outside of it, or by the outside of it. But we also had an airport, which might sound strange for a town or a village of 50 people. But a local crop duster used that airport for his business. But there was also a local Experimental Aircraft Association chapter there. And what this is aviation enthusiasts that build kit planes and fly them. And, it's big all over the country. My oldest memories of Payton was that they would have a big air show there every year that drew people from miles around, and it was really exciting as a kid to sit in your backyard and watch this it was a big deal. It really was. This big air show going on. But in later years, we noticed some strange activity going on at this airport. I remember one particular night, an airplane landed at night. It was dark, no lights on, nothing. It did not stick around long, and there were some trucks there. And we're going to assume, we did assume that they were unloading some cargo. And that plane was there long enough to get rid of its cargo and immediately take back off. Now, this plane came in from the north and took off from the south. And there was a low-hanging electric line at the end of that runway on the south end. And I remember my father saying, I don't know who that is, but they really know what they're doing, because they had to be really familiar with it to be able to land with no lights, take off with no lights, and clear that highline wire. And it did not take a rocket scientist to figure out what was going on. They were running drugs. Not the people that had the experimental aircraft chapter, and it wasn't the crop duster. It was just somebody who was familiar with the area. And for years and years, I often wondered who that was. And lo and behold, when I was listening to episode 12, part 1 of the Lawless Files, it was revealed to me who it was. Part of the corruption going on in Scott County involved a judge named Paul Briggs, according to the podcast. And in this episode, Bob Miller says that this guy was bringing in drugs from all over the world. And sometimes he used the Sikeston airport, but in this particular episode, they said Briggs liked using the airport in Payton because he didn't have to deal with the feds. It was just a grass airstrip. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I often wondered who in the world that was. And like I said, I'm listening to the podcast one day and it was revealed to me. It is a podcast series worth watching, worth listening to, because like I said, it details a lot of the corruption that was going on. And wow, I was just amazed that all of these years later, I finally found out who it was. So anyway, if you want to, well, we have another visitor here. Say hi, Nilla. You got to bear with them because they haven't seen me all day. But anyway, as I was stating before, I kind of had a history with Bob Miller starting in 2005. I'm very passionate about history, especially Southern history. And this was a time when the governor of Missouri at the time, Bob Holden, had taken down the Confederate flags that were flying in Higginsville Confederate Cemetery and at Fort Davidson and Pilot Knob. I had joined the Sons of Confederate Veterans, but they had their hands tied behind their backs because they were a nonprofit organization, and you can't be political in a nonprofit organization. So I was invited to join the League of the South, which at the time was a pretty honorable organization that was not non-for-profit and could fight back and could be political. And I eventually became the vice chairman of the Missouri chapter and had a Southeast Missouri chapter here as well. So our mission, our particular mission, was to try and promote Southern history. Our theory was if we promoted it and told the truth about it, perhaps, maybe, the attacks on it would stop. So we set our sights on Jackson, Missouri, because Jackson, in the Jackson City Cemetery, Confederate Colonel William Jeffers is buried there. And in researching Colonel Jeffers, one will find that he was a very honorable man. He was staunch in his beliefs in defending the South during the war between the states. He was an honorable soldier. After the war, he moved to Dunklin County, I believe, and he actually organized a militia to fight the Klan down there. And then later he moved to Stoddard County, and he was very active in helping take care of his fellow Confederate veterans. So we wanted to place a Missouri battle flag at his monument in Jackson City Cemetery. Now, Missouri battle flag is blue with a red border and a white Roman cross in the left corner of it. We figured that was pretty what's the word I'm looking for? We thought it was safe, okay? And plus it would be fitting since he fought under General Sterling Price, and the Missouri battle flag was also known as the General Sterling Price flag. So we took this proposition to the mayor of Jackson at the time, who was Paul Sander. He seemed to be for it. The American Legion seemed to be for it. The Veterans of Foreign Wars seemed to be for it. Until Bob Miller got a hold of the story and put it out there. And this isn't Bob's fault. This particular instance isn't. But there was another organization called the Southern Poverty Law Center that was located in Montgomery, Alabama. And they specialized in looking for boogeymen around every tree and every corner because they raised money from these things. So once they saw the initial write-up in the paper, Heidi Byrick, who was the director of what they called the intelligence report, wrote a letter to the editor basically saying that our organization was dangerous. We were a hate group. I was dangerous. Pretty much anything you could think of. So this started a tit for tat. A lot of the liberal allies locally were writing letters. The word treason was thrown out there. Perhaps I was a treasonous person. One good reverend suggested. But really aggravated me about Bob was it seemed like he could not, during this tit for tat and this battle going on, it seemed like he couldn't ask me a question without running back to the Southern Poverty Law Center and getting their take on it. Eventually, I guess you could say we fought them to a draw. They tabled the idea. They didn't say no. They didn't say yes. They just wanted it to go away, essentially. But I wanted to address the Jackson City Council. This was in February 2005, I believe. And they kind of didn't want me to do that. Mayor Sanders kind of was reneging on this. So I called him out a few times. So I got my day in court, so to speak. It wasn't a court setting. It was a city council meeting. And I addressed everything that had been said about me, about the organization I was in at the time. I brought forth history. I brought the Missouri battle flag. The other side was really loaded for bear. They brought in a representative from the American Civil Liberties Union, I believe she was from. And boy, did she make an entrance at the time. Tall, blonde woman, form-fitting dress, and the male city council members just seemed to just kind of go gaga over her. So when it was all said and done, I was not able to sway them. But at the same time, all of those people and organizations that attacked me, they were not successful either in their attempt to portray me as treasonous, as a hate-filled person, whatever kind of name you could call me, I left with my integrity intact. My name was still good. But I guess you could say in a way they kind of won because they kept the flag from going up. And when I finally did get to address the city council, I told them, look, don't let these organizations and these people stop you from honoring a veteran, because your school mascot is an Indian and you have Jackson Indians on all of your water towers. Don't think they won't come after it someday. So as I said, when this was all over, I believe it was probably all over by March of 2005. Not my flag, the Missouri battle flag, it didn't go up over or beside or anywhere near Colonel Jeffers' monument. But afterwards, there was an exchange between one of my brothers and Bob Miller, and one of my brothers asked him, "Are you not capable of asking my brother a question without running to the Southern Poverty Law Center every time you ask him a question?" And Miller finally admits, "I probably wouldn't use them again." And I thought, well, gee, thanks. Now that you have successfully torpedoed all of this, now you admit you probably wouldn't use them again. Later on, Mayor Paul Sander would try to run for a county office, I believe it was, and he lost bigly, as Trump would say. And I don't think that was a coincidence. But remember the warning that I gave the Jackson City Council in February of 2005. They will come after your symbols next. Well, ironically, in February 2019, it was Bob Miller himself, who was editor by this time of the Southeast Missourian, that wrote a column entitled "An Idea for a New Jackson Mascot." And in it, he was suggesting other mascots the city and the schools should adopt other than the Jackson Indian. I will put a link in the description of this video to Bob's column, a detailed play-by-play account of my initial attempt to get a Missouri battle flag at the monument for Colonel Jeffers. And some other useful information in there. You know what? I'll even put a link to Bob's podcast. Specifically, the episode that talks about Peyton, Missouri, and just who was flying in the drugs to this little bitty hamlet in North Stoddard County. I have to admit that I'm really impressed by Bob Miller's podcast series, The Lawless Files. But then I remind myself it was a mere 3 years ago that he published his column suggesting a new mascot for the Jackson Indians, or for the city of Jackson and the schools, rather, to replace the Indian. So I will say that Bob has seemed to have matured as a journalist in his podcast, The Lawless Files. And I can forgive, but I don't forget. I'm hoping that that he's more objective these days. He appears to be. And I hope that he's matured as a journalist. But I have to, you know what, Bob? I have to thank you for this podcast that you did, because you answered a question that many of us were wondering for decades now, and that was just who was flying them drugs into the airport at Peyton. So I got to give you credit. I got to give you credit for that. I mean, wow. On the other hand, I hope that Bob Miller can look back and see that he could have and should have covered our attempt to provide a Missouri battle flag for Colonel Jeffers. I hope that he looks back and sees that he could have handled that quite differently and had not relied so heavily on such a leftist organization. But yeah, that's that's the story for this evening. Perhaps a little disjointed. I had a lot going on there. But I'll put a link to the Lawless Files. I will put a link to my summary of what happened in Jackson, Missouri, regarding myself and the city council and I can't talk. The Southern Poverty Law Center and a handful of their allies, and hopefully you'll be entertained by it, maybe learn a few things. So thanks for watching. I am going to finish winding down. As you can hear, it got quieted in here. The dogs got their bellies full. And I'll be back soon for some more stories about my life for you. We'll talk to you later. Hope you have a great week. Bye.